fast. The next goal in the SRIA is on the subsurface digital transition. So as Julie already mentioned, there's a lot of research inside the SRIA connected to, let's say, science, whether it is geology or applied geology. This part is on how we are going to disseminate all that science to the end users so they can use it in their own workflows and in their own day-to-day job. And it might be that I use some of the same words, but they're meant a bit differently. That's the thing with language. Sometimes we think we use the same words and we try to convey the same meaning, but in this case it's a bit different. So when I talk about models, I mean data models, and not the content within. That's coming from the geology or the applied science. Just as a slight warning up front. So data and digitization is at the heart of the EU strategy. And for us as a geological community, that means to create access to geological and trusted data, applied geological data, but also information on top of that and knowledge to be used for EU policy, but also EU economy and EU society as a whole. And we will do that by closing the gap between data on one side and the actual needs of our stakeholders on the other. And we will do that by putting a value chain in between. A value chain where data can lead to information and where the combination of that information brings knowledge, and the use of that knowledge helps us understand what's happening in our surroundings, both above and below the surface. And that will help us understand the future and steer it in a direction that is sustainable for the entire society. And by doing so, we are going to shift the traditional way of doing that by, let's say, a supply-driven approach, where we say, look at this map. It has beautiful colors on it. It took us 10 years to make it. We are very proud of it. Please use it. And then some of our stakeholders say, thank you for the map. Could you please help me explain how I can use it? So instead of demand-driven, instead of supply-driven, we're going to make the shift for demand-driven. Interacting with our stakeholders and finding out what they actually need in their day-to-day job. And if we understand that, then we can drill down this value chain and say, okay, is what you need? Then this is the knowledge that we need to collect. And then this is the information that we need to feed into that knowledge. And that means that this and this data is very important as a solid basis for that. So that's the way we try to shape the research within the SRIA and get a better grip on which topics we actually need to focus on, all aimed at creating this value-added product at the end, instead of creating data just for the sake of creating data. And one important aspect in this is, as Julie mentioned, this has been going on in each country for decades already. But something happens when you try to zoom out to the European level. So we have to rethink and reinvent what actually is valuable when we look at the European map instead of a map of a country. Which detail do we need? Which kind of information needs to be on that map? How detailed does it need to be? And if we zoom out, there's one very important aspect that we may not lose, and that's the connection with what is underneath. So even though a European map can be more generalized, and maybe it should be more generalized, we can always drill down to the more detailed maps and the more detailed data within all the national surveys. And if we achieve that, then we have this live value chain connecting all the national details and all the national knowledge up to a pan-European information product. And that's what we're aiming at. democratization of data and information is central in the European policies. And that means creating access to data, making it findable and accessible, of course, but also thinking about the usability of that data. It must be interoperable, it must be reusable without any legal constraints. And in a polity context, that means that we have to create access for fact-based decision-making for our policies. And in the economic context, it means that we have to create access over the entire value chain for other people to create their own value on top of that. Whether it's academia to feed into their own research, or consultancy to build new software tools on top of that, or improve their business models. And in the end, it's also meant for citizens in Europe to get more insight on what's happening, why the policies are aimed at what they are, and try to understand and bridge the gap between understanding what the policies are meant for and the public opinion, trying to create informed citizens as much as possible. So we have 4 priorities in this goal. First one, no surprise here, fair data and standardization. Without that, nothing else happens. Second one, transparent and accessible sustainable value chains. The word sustainable is very important here. So it means that it's more than creating it once and then everybody leaves. It needs to be supported, it needs to be alive, there needs to be new data going in, there needs to be new interpretations coming out. Otherwise, it's very outdated and people don't trust it anymore. Third priority, ensuring up-to-date and trusted data. And the last one, enhancing the current EGDI data platform into a European geoscience knowledge hub. So, on the fair data and standardization, why is that needed, you might ask? We already have Inspire. We already have the high-value data sets. So, what can we contribute as a geological community? What we can do, for instance, looking at the Critical Raw Materials Act, is add that specific part of information that we need to actually feed into the European policymakers to understand how we can reach our goals of sustainability and providing critical raw materials from domestic sites in Europe. Is that already in Inspire? Not quite. Do we have that information as National Geological Service? Yes, we have. Do we have the mandate to deliver that to the European Commission? We also have that. The only thing that we need to agree upon is how we are going to collect that additional information, how we are going to model it, and how we are going to share it amongst ourselves. And if we do that, it can be simply combined and added up into this one harmonized pan-European product. And if we don't do that, then we still collect the information, it will be very applicable on a national level, and we can still send it to the European Commission, but it's not covering Europe, and it's not helping. So that's where we actually can add value. Agree on that extension on top of the Inspire before we start collecting all that additional information. And the same holds for concepts. Julie also mentioned it. When we start to transform geology into different domains, whether it's groundwater or raw materials or other resources, we need to do that in an agreed fashion so it's possible to combine all those different models. If we all do that in our own way and think, well, the way we do it in the Netherlands is the best, talking about my country, and everyone should do the same. No, that's not helping. We should agree on a method, on a concept that is applicable for all countries in Europe, and that actually helps creating these 3D geological models that cover all of Europe. And if you look at this picture, I created this with AI, obviously. The message here is that everything's connected. So the jigsaw puzzle is finished, right? And all the pieces fit nicely together, no gaps. But if you look a bit more closely, it's completely wrong. All the flags don't make any sense. And that's what happens when you don't agree on the concepts. You get a picture, it's covering the whole of Europe, it doesn't make any sense. And again, that's where we can add value as a geological community. Value chains. I already talked about it. And in this picture, that's symbolized with this glass pyramid, where we have data in the basis, information on top of that, knowledge and wisdom all on the top. And why is it made of glass? Because what we need to do is build these pyramids and also transfers to the user how they are being built. So they understand when they're entering the pyramid on top, because that's where their day-to-day job is, that's where their information need is, that they understand what the basis is so that they can drill down if they want to. They don't have to, because it's fit for purpose on top, but if they want to, they can drill down, and that will build trust. So if we try to create access to these value chains, that will be more than simply maps. We will combine it with visualizations, tables, statistics, but also storytelling, guiding the users in what they're actually looking at and helping them applying it into their own workflows. And on top of that, in the upper part of the pyramid, we are thinking of building a dashboard kind of entry, because we are very much used to talking to each other, one expert to the other, and then we very fast understand what we mean. But for non-experts, that's a completely different story. So we need to rethink on how we can communicate all the expertise that we have in such a way that non-experts actually understand it and can appreciate it. I already mentioned the word trust a couple of times. Trust takes a long time to get, and it disappears very fast if you don't take care of it. So if we are going to build these value chains, we need to make sure that people actually trust them before they use it. And trust comes when you show that where the value comes from, who contributed to it, which organizations, but also how up-to-date they are. If you go to a website and find some information on groundwater, for instance, and you click on this groundwater monitoring well, and the last measurement was 10 years ago, that's the last time you're going to visit that website. So up to date, but also reliable, because you understand where it comes from. And reliable also means that you have to ensure that only the people that are authorized can actually deliver data and information to that value chain. And on the other end, when there's not open data inside that value chain, some people might use the restricted data. And again, you have to make sure that people can have access to that restricted part without accidentally opening up that data in the public environment. And the last part is being more than only a data infrastructure. So growing into this knowledge hub where we extend the content on top of the data, creating access to the expertise we have, to the different organizations we work for, and also, let's say, in the way that we are actually building this infrastructure. So why not build our own geological data space as a place where all the data and information that we already have on a national level can be shared openly and freely and secure. And we put on top all the pan-European products created on that basis. because then we have the entire workflow, we have the entire value chain inside one environment. And if we do that, and we use the right ontologies and the right vocabularies and the right models and the right concepts, we can open up that treasure of data to the linked data concept. And then we open up to all different sets of possibilities. And if we get there by the end of this journey, then I would be very proud at least. Thank you.